Welcome to today's video. I feel like it's been forever since I put out a video. I wanted to get out a video today despite the fact that I'm not feeling the greatest. But what I thought I would talk about today is tips for cracked, sore, bleeding nipples. And it seems like it is something that is happening more and more with moms. It used to be that it was just a simple, latching correctly and there would be no problems. But I feel like a lot of times, we might automatically think, okay, baby has a tongue tie, or the baby's not latched correctly, I'm doing something wrong myself, the position isn't correct, whatever the case. But I think in some instances, and it does seem to be happening more often, babies are born earlier and they're smaller. Mouth circumference with the nipple circumference can make a difference. So if the baby has a really small mouth and you have a large nipple, or even if the baby just has a really small mouth and maybe your nipple size doesn't really matter, it's just the baby cannot really get enough of the breast in their mouth because their mouth is so small. And I know this happened to me with my fourth baby. I didn't experience any nipple pain or soreness with any of my kids until my fourth. And the only thing that I could attribute to the difference was that she was a lot smaller than my other babies by a pound. So, and a pound is a big deal. So my first baby was like 5'9", and my second was 5'14", and my third was 6'2". Now, those seem small, and it's funny because I didn't have any nipple soreness with the three of them. But my daughter was very premature, and she was 4'11" at birth, and I believe by the time I got her home, she was 4 pounds. So she was a lot smaller than they were. And although one of my sons was born as early as she was, he was a pound heavier and have to stay in a hospital. He was fine. So I feel like that kind of played a part. So I'm wondering, in a lot of cases, it's not that mom's doing a bad job trying to latch her baby, because I think moms are getting a lot more help than they used to. I think sometimes it's just that the baby is small, can't open their mouth wide enough to get a good latch. So yes, they're not latching correctly, but it's not really because mom is doing something wrong. It's just that baby is smaller. And so there's some things that you would want to do just so that you can maybe really avoid sore nipples, or at least where they're not damaged. Sometimes we're going to have they can be a little bit sore just from breastfeeding so much, but not to where they're cracked, bleeding, and extremely painful. So I wanted to talk about some healing tips, some things that you can do to promote healing, and also a little bit about avoidance. So possibly being able to avoid sore nipples altogether, or just cracked, bleeding, nipples. So I'm going to be looking down because I have my phone here, and I'm on kellymom.com, and I'm going to put the link in the description below, just so you can go and read the article for yourself, because I don't go through everything word for word. The first thing that we just have to make clear that is the most important factor to healing is correct latch. So correcting whatever problem is causing the soreness. So again, like I said, if the baby is extremely small, this can make that hard, and a lot of times it's just having to allow time for the baby to grow a little bit. But the best thing that you can do in that situation is to try your best to get as much of the areola around the nipple into your baby's mouth. Hard, but if you are able to use a technique where you point your nipple to the roof of their mouth, and you get them to open nice and wide as they can possibly, open that mouth. When you think of them crying, they can usually open their mouth pretty wide. So you want their mouth to be open as wide as if they're crying. So the best way to do that is to rub your nipple on the upper lip area here under the nose, and they will reach back and open their mouth wide. That's one technique. And what you want to do, sometimes when a baby is really hungry, the minute they feel that nipple, they just latch on. And that can be painful because they're not latching on correctly. So number one, you want to make sure that you're feeding them frequently so that they're not frantic when they come to the breast. Some babies just tend to be more that way. So say you're feeding every 2 to 3 hours, you might want to start at the 1.5 hour mark. If they're feeding every 3, try every 2 or every 2.5. You just want to get them a little bit before they're starving or where they're really hungry, and that way they'll take the time to get their mouth open wide. And if they just latch on, you want to break that latch with your finger, break the suction, get their mouth open, and then take your nipple out. Never just pull your nipple out. And that can be hard when it hurts, when it's painful. But you got to take them off correctly and then get them back on. If it may not be painful, but you know that they're not really latched correctly or fully, then you would want to take them off and just keep doing that. Now, a lot of times moms, they feel bad because they're like, I'm so tired, I gave into a bottle or I gave into a pacifier. I feel like it's hard to tell a mom to avoid pacifiers, especially. Bottles, I definitely still really encourage to avoid a bottle, but any type of nipple that is different from your own can cause the baby to suck on your nipple differently than what they should be. So sometimes you've got to allow yourself a little bit of time when they first latch, because say they've been sucking on a pacifier for the last few hours and now you're trying to put them on the breast. It's going to take them a few minutes to suck on the breast the proper way. And this can frustrate the baby, which is another reason why you want to try to feed them a little bit before they're really hungry so that they're not going to get so easily frustrated. Because when that happens, it's like you have to stop breastfeeding, you have to calm them down, and then you have to put them back on the breast. And sometimes you might have to express a little bit of your milk out, use like a medicine dropper to feed them a little bit to get them less frantic. So if at all possible, try to feed them more frequently. And so like I said, if they're feeding every 2, then just try every 1.5 hours. Or if they're feeding every 3, try every 2 to 2.5 hours. Just to give yourself that extra time of practice, especially if you're using a pacifier or a bottle. Now, the other thing I would always encourage moms to do is when you give your baby a pacifier, try to not have them sucking on that pacifier the entire time between feeds. So say you fed them and they're still a little bit fussy and they're full, they've eaten, they've the diaper's changed, whatever, and you decide to give them a pacifier, and that, pacifies them. One of the reasons we don't recommend it is because of nipple confusion, but a lot of times it's because pacifiers can limit feeds. Sometimes a baby needs to feed more often and they are hungry, and when we stick a pacifier in their mouth, we're not actually meeting their need for food, and it can affect your milk supply or just getting the amount of milk that you need to establish your supply. So in those first 2 weeks, that's one of the reasons why we say to avoid pacifiers. Again, I know this is hard. So if you can try to use a pacifier for just enough time to soothe them and calm them, and then take the pacifier out of their mouth. Not always easy, but if you can try that so that you're not pulling the pacifier out of their mouth and then putting them to the breast. Because then they're literally sucking on the pacifier and then they go to your breast and they want to suck your breast the same way. Most women do not have a nipple that looks anything like a pacifier nipple. So when a baby feels, is sucking on just a nipple and then goes onto the breast, they tend to just grab the nipple because that's what they've been sucking on for the last however many, sometimes positioning plays a part, so you can try different positions because sometimes a baby will latch better in a football hold. Some do better in a cross cradle hold. Some do better in just regular cradle hold, maybe sideline. So look at the different positions and try all of them and see what your baby seems to do the best at and what you're most comfortable at as well. The laid back position is one of the most normal positions for a baby to latch correctly because they literally have to lift their head back and then their mouth is open really wide and come over on top of it. They can't really just grab the nipple. It's a more natural way of latching. So if you're having some sore nipples, I would recommend to do the laid back positioning more often. Also, a tip is to breastfeed on the uninjured nipple or the one that hurts the least first. So when the baby's really hungry, don't put them on the sore nipple. Try to put them on the one that's least sore or isn't sore at all. And then that will help so that when the baby does go to that second nipple or the second breast, they're not as frantic on it. And, you know, maybe you can get them to latch correctly or at least not as aggressive so it's not as painful for you. The initial latch on does tend to hurt at first, especially if you are sore and cracked. So sometimes taking some ice and putting that on your nipple a few minutes before you breastfeed just kind of numbs the nipple, and then putting the baby on, that can really help a lot. You're just doing a brief application of the ice right before baby breastfeeds. So you're just trying to like numb the nipple a little bit. You don't want to leave it on for a long period of time. You're just kind of going to rub the ice cube around the nipple for just a few seconds and do that with each side or with the side that hurts the most, and that can kind of help numb it. If it's too painful to breastfeed, and I've had moms where it's just too painful, you can pump you definitely want to pump that breast. Sorry, my stand is not working so great. So you definitely want to empty the milk on that side. You don't want to avoid, because you don't want to get plugged ducts, you don't want to get mastitis. So you need to empty that breast, as well as you want to keep your milk supply up. So you would want to hand express or use a breast pump to get that milk out. Some women, the breast pump is painful too because of the nipple being so sore. So you would want to use hand expression in that situation, or maybe a manual pump would be a little less painful because of the suction, or if you are using electric, just have the suction down low enough that it's not causing you too much pain. Another option is, and I've heard a lot of moms say this, that they use nipple shields. I don't really recommend a nipple shield unless it's like there's nothing else is working for you and you're getting to the point where you're like, I'm just going to stop breastfeeding. Then I would be like, yes, definitely get yourself a nipple shield. Or if your nipples are so damaged and so sore and painful and cracked and bleeding, then you need to allow them to heal before you put the baby back on. So I would recommend a nipple shield at that point. You would only want to use it until the nipple, heals, and then get the baby back on. And the reason why we don't really recommend this very often is a lot of times you have to wean the baby off, because once they get that feeling, it's hard for them to go back to the regular feeling of a breast. So, that would be like your last resort, but it is there for you. A lot of moms have had, success using that. And the one thing that I always just say is pump right after. Just do the best you can and pump right after so that you make sure that your breast is empty, because sometimes baby can't empty the breast very well. Another thing that you can use is salt water rinse after nursing. So you can make your own normal saline solution. You can look up what that is. It's basically a half a teaspoon of salt in 1 cup of warm water. This would be something you'd want to do each time. You wouldn't want to use the same water because you wouldn't want to get any contamination of bacteria. And then you could do this where you can soak your nipples in that, maybe take a washcloth and put it on it, or you can lean over and let your nipples lay into the saline wash. You don't want to soak more than about 5 to 10 minutes because this saline solution can hydrate the skin so much that instead of healing, it can cause more cracking, and no more than 5 10 minutes. I would say about 5 minutes is a good rule of thumb. Now, if the baby objects to the saltwater taste, you can just rinse them and then pat them dry. And, after that, you could apply some breast milk expressed and put it on there and leave it there on your nipple just to allow and to promote healing, because breast milk does have healing properties. And so by letting that dry onto the nipple, that can help tremendously. You can also use any type of pure lanolin. Do not have to wash it off. It is safe for the baby to use. I would say the number one thing that I did that really helped me with my first 3 is allowing the nipples to air dry. So when you're done breastfeeding, we have this tendency to like cover immediately. And a lot of times you won't have to do this later on in the breastfeeding, but in those first few weeks, because you're breastfeeding so much and the baby's learning, you have to allow the air to dry your nipples before you cover them back up. And a lot of times we'll say, well, yeah, I didn't like latch my bra, I just put it over. You don't want to do that. You want to allow it to be completely open to the air. When this happens, this just promotes healing, or promotes healing, but it also keeps it from getting to the point where it's so moist that, and the moisture sits on there and causes cracked nipples. Another thing that's important is if you're using nursing pads, you never want to leave a wet nursing pad on your nipple. So this is where a lot of times the disposable come in handy, because as soon as they get wet, you can throw them away. Now, the ones that you can wash, you would have to take those off, put on a clean one every single time it gets wet. So that's where disposable are a little bit easier, because you really do not want to leave that on. Another thing that is good is you can take like ibuprofen or Tylenol to just kind of help with any soreness. And once a day using a non-antibacterial soap to gently clean the wounded area will help as well. And then you can just rinse it under warm water. Using soap on the nipple area is not recommended unless the skin is broken. So you don't need to wash that area unless you're already dealing with the cracked nipples, because you're trying to clean the wounds itself. So those are some tips. I hope that helps you guys. A lot of you new moms out there that are struggling with sore nipples, I just kind of wanted to put out an updated video and help you know what is out there that you can use. Some women talk about using coconut oil on the nipples, how that really helps with, preventing sore nipples and preventing damaged nipples. Some will use like another type of oil, like an olive oil. Some will use what was the other one? I can't remember. But pure lanolin is like the safest and most well-known safe way. Some moms are a little more concerned about using anything other than that, just because they don't want to cause any issues for the baby. But so far, like coconut oil has not been something that is, harmful to the baby. But I would say if you're concerned with that, just wash it off before you breastfeed. That just kind of helps. So use it in between and then wash it off right before you breastfeed. So I hope this video helps. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.